Elena clutched the bouquet of white lilies, her brother's favorite, as she walked the familiar path through Pine Grove Cemetery. The mid-September breeze sent fallen leaves dancing across the manicured grass. 10 years. A full decade since she had stood here with her family, watching as they lowered Michael's coffin into the ground. She wore a simple blue dress today. Michael had always told her blue brought out the warmth in her eyes. Her dark hair, now showing the first hints of gray at 32, blew across her face. She tucked it behind her ear with a free hand, her fingers trembling slightly. The cemetery was quiet on this Tuesday afternoon. Most people visited there, loved ones on weekends, but Elena had always come on the actual date, September 14th. She couldn't bear the thought of Michael being alone on the anniversary of his death. "Hey, big brother," Elena whispered as she reached his headstone. The polished granite still looked new, the engraving clear and sharp. Michael Thomas Chambers, 1990-2015. Beloved son and brother, forever in our hearts. She knelt down, brushing away a few stray leaves from the base of the stone. "I brought your favorites again. Mom says I'm being silly, that you wouldn't care about flowers, but I remember how you used to stop by that old flower shop on Maple just to smell the lilies." A lump formed in her throat as she arranged the bouquet in the built-in vase. She could almost hear Michael's laugh, see the crinkles around his eyes when he smiled. He'd been 25 when the accident happened, just starting his life, really. Fresh out of business school with a promising career ahead of him. "The house feels empty without you," she continued, tracing the letters of his name with her fingertip. "Dad's retired now, can you believe it? He finally sold the accounting firm last year. Mom's gotten really into gardening. You should see the backyard. It's like a little paradise." Elena sat back on her heels, looking at the photograph embedded in the headstone. Michael's bright smile, his kind eyes. The photo had been taken at her college graduation, just 6 months before he died. "I still have dreams about you," she admitted. "Not the bad ones anymore, not like right after. Now I just dream that you're at Sunday dinner or calling to tell me about a movie you saw. Normal stuff. And for a few seconds after I wake up, I forget that you're gone." The tears came then, as they always did. Elena let them fall, not bothering, to wipe them away. 10 years hadn't dulled the pain as much as she'd hoped it would. "I miss you," she whispered. Every single day. A squirrel darted across a nearby grave, breaking her focus. Elena took a deep breath, collecting herself. She always told Michael about her life when she visited. It helped her feel connected to him. "Work is good. I got that promotion I told you about last time. Senior editor now. Remember how you used to read my stories in college and tell me I'd be running the place someday? Well, I'm getting closer." She smiled sadly. "Lisa had her baby, a little boy. I'm his godmother. You would have been godfather, I'm sure of it." Elena shifted, sitting fully on the grass now. The dampness from the morning dew seeped through her dress, but she didn't mind. These talks with Michael were sacred to her. Mom and Dad are still, well, they're the same. They never talk about you, not really. Dad changes the subject if I bring you up, and Mom gets that faraway look in her eyes. I think it still hurts them too much. She ran her hand through the grass beside the headstone. "They refused to look at old photos with me last Christmas. Said it would ruin the holiday. But how can remembering you ruin anything? Sometimes I feel like they're trying to forget you existed." The wind picked up, sending a chill down her spine. The cemetery felt different today somehow. Heavier, like the air before a storm. "The weird thing is," Elena said, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret, "I've been having these feelings lately. Like there's something I'm missing. Something about you. About what happened." She'd never said this aloud before, not even to her therapist. It sounded crazy, even to her own ears. "The police said it was instant, that you wouldn't have felt anything when the car went over the cliff. But why were you even on that road? You hated driving along the coast. You used to get carsick, remember? And it was so far from your route, home." Elena had gone over the facts countless times in her mind, Michael had been driving back from a late meeting at work. His car had somehow veered off the coastal highway, plunging 200 feet onto the rocks below. By the time emergency services reached him, the tide had come in. They'd recovered his body, but the damage had been extensive. Her parents had insisted on a closed casket. "It's better to remember him as he was," her father had said firmly when Elena had asked to see Michael one last time. At the time, grief-stricken and in shock, she'd agreed. Elena plucked at the grass. "I've been thinking about the funeral a lot lately, how I never got to see you, to say goodbye properly." Her voice cracked. "Maybe that's why I can't let go." She stood up, brushing the grass from her dress. Sometimes sitting here talking to a stone felt pointless, yet she couldn't stop coming. It was her last connection to her brother. As she turned to leave, she noticed an old man watching her from several graves away. He wore the green uniform of the cemetery groundskeepers, leaning on a rake. His face was deeply lined, his white hair visible beneath a worn cap. There was something in his expression, not quite pity, more like curiosity. Elena nodded politely, ready to walk past him, when he spoke. "You come every year, same day," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "You're the sister." Elena stopped. "Yes, I'm Elena Chambers. Michael was my brother." The old man nodded slowly. "I remember all of them, you know. Been working here 43 years this October." He tapped his temple with a gnarled finger. I'm all up here. Every burial." Something about his tone made Elena step closer. "You remember my brother's funeral?" "Course I do. Young fella. Big turnout, lot of fancy cars." He squinted at her. "Closed casket, wasn't it?" "Yes," Elena replied. They said there was too much damage." The old groundskeeper made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. "Seen my share of tragedies, miss. Car accidents, drownings. Families always want one last look no matter what." He shook his head. "Your brother's was different." Elena's heart began to beat faster. "Different how?" He glanced around as though checking if anyone could overhear them. The cemetery remained empty except for a distant figure visiting a grave near the entrance. "Lightest coffin I ever helped. Lower," he said finally. "Felt all wrong. Been to hundreds of burials, miss. You get a feel for things." Elena stared at him, trying to process his words. "What are you saying?" The old man shrugged, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Not saying. Nothing, just an observation. Coffins have a certain weight to 'em is all." A chill that had nothing to do with the wind crawled up Elena's spine. "But they found his body. The police report said, 'I just tend the grounds, miss.'" He straightened, picking up his rake. "Don't mind me. Old folks talk too much." "Wait," Elena said as he began to turn away. "Please, if you know something about my brother." The old man's eyes softened. "Been here long enough to know some things aren't what they seem. That's all I'm saying." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "Might want to look into who was at that viewing, the private one, before the funeral. Just the family wasn't it?" Elena nodded slowly. Her parents had insisted on a private viewing at the funeral home, just the three of them. She'd been too distraught to argue when they'd told her the casket would remain closed. "Not my business," the groundskeeper muttered, already walking away. "Not my business at all." Elena stood rooted to the spot, watching him shuffle down the path between the graves. His words echoed in her mind. "Lightest coffin I ever helped lower," she turned back to Michael's headstone, seeing it with new eyes. For 10 years she'd accepted what she'd been told, that Michael had died in a tragic accident, that his body had been too damaged to view, that the closed casket was for her own good. But what if it wasn't true? The question, once formed, refused to disappear. Elena touched the cool granite of her brother's headstone one last time. "What really happened to you?" she whispered. As she walked back to her car, the peaceful feeling that usually came after her visits was missing. Instead, Her mind raced with questions that had never occurred to her before. Why had her parents been so insistent on the closed casket? Why had they seemed almost relieved when she'd agreed not to see Michael one last time? And most troubling of all, what if the coffin had felt light because there had been nothing inside? Elena slid into her car and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. For the first time in 10 years, she felt something other than grief. When thinking about her brother, she felt doubt, and doubt, unlike grief, demanded answers. Elena couldn't sleep that night. The groundskeeper's words kept replaying in her mind. Lightest coffin I ever helped lower. She tossed and turned, her bedroom suddenly too warm despite the cool September air flowing through the cracked window. By morning, dark circles had formed under her eyes, but a new determination had settled in her chest. She called in sick to work, something she rarely did, and sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, planning her next steps. I need to see the accident report, she murmured to herself. The police had provided a basic summary at the time, but grief had clouded her judgment. She'd accepted their conclusions without question. Elena showered, dressed in jeans and a light sweater, and drove to the county police station. The building hadn't changed much in the last decade. Same brick exterior, same faded flag out front. At the front desk, a young officer looked up from his computer. His nameplate read, Officer Rodriguez. "How can I help you today?" he asked. Elena cleared her throat. "I'd like to request a copy of an accident report from 10 years ago. My brother's car accident. Michael Chambers." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "I'll need some ID and you'll have to fill out a request form." 20 minutes later, Elena sat in a small waiting area. Her hands couldn't seem to stay still, fidgeting with her phone case, tapping against her leg. "Ms. Chambers." She looked up to see an older officer standing in the doorway. Gray hair, weathered face, kind eyes. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar. "I'm Lieutenant Cooper. I understand you're looking for information about Michael Chambers." Elena stood. "Yes, my brother. He died in a car accident 10 years ago." Recognition flashed in the lieutenant's eyes. "I remember that case. I was one of the responding officers. Why don't you come to my office?" She followed him down a hallway to a small office lined with filing cabinets and framed photos. He motioned for her to sit. "The clerk said you were requesting the full accident report?" Elena nodded. "Yes, I want to understand what happened better." Lieutenant Cooper studied her face. "It was a long time ago. Sometimes reopening old wounds doesn't help the healing process." "I need to know," Elena said firmly. The lieutenant sighed, turning to his computer. After a few clicks, the printer in the corner hummed to life. "This is the report. Pretty straightforward case, as I recall. Your brother's car went off the coastal highway around 11 p.m. No other vehicles involved. The car was spotted the next morning by a jogger on the beach." Elena took the papers he handed her, scanning the first page. "The cause? Most likely fatigue or distraction. The road curves sharply there, and if a driver isn't paying attention..." He shook his head. "We found no evidence of mechanical failure." She flipped through the report, noting details she'd either forgotten or never known. Michael's car had been a 2013 Honda Civic. The estimated time of death was between 10:30 and 11:15 p.m. No alcohol or drugs were found in his system. Then something caught her eye. "It says here the body was recovered by Coast Guard personnel?" Lieutenant Cooper nodded. "The car landed on the rocks, but the tide was coming in. By the time emergency services arrived, the vehicle was partially submerged." "And my brother's body?" The lieutenant shifted in his seat, a slight frown crossing his face. "As I recall, he was still in the driver's seat, seatbelt fastened." Elena stared at the report, something nagging at her. "It doesn't say anything about the condition of the body. That would be in the medical examiner's report. Can I see that too?" Lieutenant Cooper hesitated. "Ms. Chambers, may I ask why you're looking into this now? After all this time?" Elena met his gaze directly. "Something doesn't feel right. I've had this feeling for years, but yesterday, I spoke to a groundskeeper at the cemetery. He said some things that made me wonder." "What kind of things?" The lieutenant's voice remained casual, but Elena noticed a new tension in his shoulders. He said my brother's coffin felt unusually light. Lieutenant Cooper leaned back in his chair. Cemetery. Workers aren't medical professionals, Miss Chambers. And after traumatic accidents, bodies are often... He paused, seemingly searching for a delicate way to phrase it. Well, there's significant damage, weight changes. I understand that, Elena said. But I'd still like to see the medical examiner's report. The lieutenant's face closed off slightly. You'd need to request that from the county medical examiner's office. I can't access those files from here. He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. Some cases are better left closed, Ms. Chambers, for everyone's peace of mind. There was something in his tone, a warning perhaps, that sent a chill through Elena. She gathered the accident report and thanked him, but as she reached the door, she turned back. Lieutenant Cooper, you were there that day, weren't you? You saw my brother? A long pause. I was at the scene, yes. What did you see? The lieutenant's eyes darted to the open door, then back to Elena. What I saw was a tragic accident. A young man's life cut short. Nothing more. Elena nodded slowly, unconvinced. As she turned to leave, Lieutenant Cooper spoke again, his voice lower. Ms. Chambers, grief can make us look for answers, for meaning. Sometimes there isn't any. Sometimes an accident is just an accident, and sometimes it isn't, Elena replied quietly. She drove straight from the police station to her parents' house, the accident report tucked in her bag. The familiar two-story colonial looked the same as always. Pristine lawn, neatly trimmed. Hedges, her mother's seasonal wreath on the front door. Elena's father, Thomas Chambers, answered on the second knock. At 65, he remained fit and distinguished, though his once dark hair had turned completely silver. Elena. His surprise quickly shifted to concern. Is everything all right? Shouldn't you be at work? I took the day off. She stepped inside, kissing his cheek. Is Mom home? In the garden, as usual. What's going on? Elena moved past him to the kitchen, which opened onto the back patio. Through the glass doors, she could see her mother kneeling by a flower bed, gardening gloves on, her graying blonde hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. I visited Michael yesterday, Elena said, watching her father's reaction carefully. His face softened. Ah, the anniversary. I should have remembered. You and Mom never visit his grave. Her father sighed. Everyone grieves differently, sweetheart. Your mother and I, we prefer to remember Michael in our own way. Elena pulled the accident report from her bag, placing it on the kitchen counter. I got this today. Her father glanced at it, then away, moving to the coffee maker. What is that? Michael's accident report. His hand stilled on the coffee pot. Why would you do that after all this time? I met someone at the cemetery yesterday. The groundskeeper. He said something strange about Michael's coffin, that it felt too light. The coffee pot clattered against the counter as her father set it down too hard. What nonsense is this? Some stranger at the cemetery and suddenly you're digging into the past. Dad, I just want to understand. There's nothing to understand. Your brother died in an accident. It was horrible and tragic and unfair, but it happened. His voice rose with each word. What good does it do to reopen all of that? The back door slid open and Elena's mother stepped inside, pulling off her gardening gloves. I thought I heard voices. Elena, what a lovely surprise. Catherine Chambers embraced her daughter, smelling of soil and the lavender lotion she'd used for as long as Elena could remember. At 62, she remained beautiful, though sorrow had etched permanent lines around her eyes after Michael's death. What are you two discussing so intensely? She asked, looking between them. Elena's father answered before she could. Elena's been visiting the cemetery again. Now she's got some wild idea from a groundskeeper there. Her mother's smile faltered. What idea? I just want to know more about what happened to Michael, Elena said. I never saw his body. I never got to say goodbye properly. We've been through this, her father said firmly. The medical examiner advised against it. Your brother was too damaged, Elena finished. But what if he wasn't? What if there was another reason for the closed casket? Her mother sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly pale. Elena, please don't do this. Don't do what? Ask questions? Try to understand why my brother was on a road he never took? Why his coffin felt unnaturally light? Enough. Her father slammed his hand on the counter, making both women jump. I won't have you disrespecting your brother's memory with these conspiracy theories. Elena stared at him, shocked by the outburst. Her father rarely lost his temper. I'm not disrespecting anything. I loved Michael. I just want the truth. The truth is that he died, her father said, his voice breaking. Our son died and nothing will bring him back. Her mother began to cry silently, shoulders shaking. Elena felt terrible, but she couldn't back down now. I'm going upstairs to look through Michael's things. There's nothing there, her father said quickly. We packed it all away years ago. Then I'll unpack it. Elena headed for the stairs, ignoring her father's protests. Michael's room had been preserved like a museum exhibit for the first few years after his death, but eventually her parents had converted it to a guest room. Still, they'd stored his belongings in the attic. In the dim light of the attic, Elena found the boxes marked Michael stacked neatly in the corner. She opened the first one. College textbooks, sports trophies, yearbooks, normal mementos of a life cut short. The second box contained clothes, still smelling faintly of the cologne he'd worn. The third held photos, concert ticket stubs, birthday, cards. In the fourth box, tucked between his high school diploma and a stack of economics journals, Elena found a leather-bound journal she'd never seen before. The cover was worn, the pages slightly yellowed with age. She opened it carefully. Inside, in Michael's familiar handwriting, were dated entries spanning his final year of life. Elena carried the journal back downstairs. Her parents were still in the kitchen, speaking in hushed, urgent tones that stopped abruptly when she entered. I found this, she said, holding up the journal. Did either of you know Michael kept a journal? The color drained from her father's face. Her mother looked away. Elena opened to a random page and began to read, April 17, 2015. The discrepancies in the accounts are worse than I thought. VP knows I've seen them. Got a warning today. Subtle but clear. Dad says to leave it alone. That some clients require special handling. I don't like it. She looked up at her parents. Who is VP? Her father stood suddenly. That journal is private. You have no right. Michael's dead, Dad. He can't care about privacy anymore. Elena, please, her mother begged. Some things are better left in the past. Elena turned to the last entry, dated the day before Michael supposedly died. September 13, 2015. Meeting with VP tonight. Have copies of everything. Told Dad what I'm doing. He's furious, says I'll destroy everything he's built. Maybe I will. But how can I look the other way? If anything happens to me, don't believe what they tell you. A heavy silence filled the kitchen as Elena closed the journal. She looked at her parents, her father rigid with anger, her mother crumpling under an invisible weight. What did Michael find? Elena asked quietly. And who is VP? Before either could answer, the phone rang, shattering the tension. Her mother answered it, then held it out to Elena with a shaking hand. It's Aunt Martha. She wants to speak with you. Says it's urgent. Elena took the phone, her mind still reeling from what she'd discovered. Hello? Her aunt's voice was thin but determined on the other end. Elena, I heard you visited your brother's grave yesterday, and now you're asking questions. How did you know that? A heavy sigh. We need to talk, dear. There are things you should know, things about Michael. Elena looked at her parents, both watching her with fear in their eyes. What things, Aunt Martha? Not over the phone. Come to my house tomorrow. Alone. Her aunt's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. Be careful who you trust, Elena. Even family. The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at the phone, the journal clutched in her other hand. Whatever had happened to her brother 10 years ago, one thing was becoming terribly clear. It wasn't what she had been told. Elena left her parents' house with Michael's journal tucked safely in her bag. The drive home was a blur, her mind racing with questions. Who was VP? What had Michael discovered that was so dangerous? And why had her parents lied to her all these years? That night she spread the journal entries across her kitchen table, reading each one carefully. The earliest entry was from January 2015, 8 months before Michael's supposed death. Started at Dad's firm today, Michael had written. Everyone's been welcoming, especially Dad's partner, Pete. Got my own office and everything. First big client meeting tomorrow with Vincent Prescott. Dad says he's the firm's most important client, Vincent Prescott. VP Elena wrote the name down, then continued reading. Most entries were mundane at first. Details about work, complaints about long hours, mentions of dates with a woman named Diane. But by March, the tone changed. Found something strange in Prescott's accounts today, one entry read. Money moving between companies that don't seem to exist. Asked Dad about it. He got weird, told me to focus on my assigned tasks. April's entries grew increasingly concerned. Michael described finding more financial irregularities, larger sums of money being hidden through a complex web of shell companies. He'd tried talking to their father again, only to be shut down more firmly. Dad said Prescott pays us to handle his finances, not question them, Michael had written. Said I was naive. Maybe I am, but this feels wrong. By June, Michael was secretly documenting everything he found. Made copies of all the suspicious transactions he'd written. Not sure what to do with them yet. If Prescott is laundering money, it could destroy Dad's firm if it gets out. But if I do nothing, I'm complicit. The final entries from September were the most disturbing. Michael had decided to confront Prescott directly against their father's wishes. Meeting Prescott tonight, read the last entry. Dad says I'm making a terrible mistake, that Prescott is dangerous. Maybe he's right. But I can't live with myself if I don't try to do the right thing. Elena closed the journal, feeling sick. Had Michael threatened to expose Vincent Prescott's crimes? Had Prescott silenced him? And where did her parents fit into all this? Sleep was impossible. By dawn, Elena had made up her mind. She would visit Aunt Martha as planned, then track down this Vincent Prescott. Aunt Martha lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. At 78, she was Elena's father's older sister and the family matriarch since Grandma Chambers had passed. Elena had always loved her aunt's straightforward manner and refusal to sugarcoat the truth. The cottage looked the same as always, climbing roses along the fence, wind chimes hanging from the porch eaves, a fat orange cat dozing in a wicker chair. Elena knocked on the door, Michael's journal in her bag. It's open, called a voice from inside. Aunt Martha sat in her favorite armchair by the window, a crocheted blanket across her lap despite the mild weather. Age had bent her once tall frame, but her eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. You've gotten thinner, was her greeting. Not eating properly? Elena managed a small smile. Hello to you too, Aunt Martha. Sit down. I've made tea. Elena settled on the sofa across from her aunt. You said you had something to tell me. About Michael. Aunt Martha poured tea into delicate cups that had belonged to Elena's grandmother. Your father called me last night. He's beside himself. He didn't want me to find Michael's journal. No, I expect he didn't. The old woman sighed heavily. Your father made choices, Elena. Choices he's been living with for 10 years. We all have. What choices? What are you talking about? Aunt Martha's hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. What do you know about Vincent Prescott? Only what I read in Michael's journal. He was Dad's client. Michael found something suspicious in his accounts. Vincent Prescott was more than a client. He practically owned this town 10 years ago. Property, businesses, half the city council in his pocket. Aunt Martha's voice hardened. And your father's accounting firm. Elena stared at her aunt. What? Do you mean he owned Dad's firm? Your grandfather built that business from nothing. Your father took it over, expanded it. But during the recession, he made some bad investments, nearly lost everything. Aunt Martha paused. Prescott offered a lifeline, money to keep the firm afloat, in exchange for certain accommodations. Dad was helping Prescott hide money, Elena said slowly. Launder it. Her aunt nodded. Your father told himself it was temporary, just until he could buy Prescott out. But once you're in business with someone like Vincent Prescott, there's no easy way out. And Michael discovered all this. Michael was always too honest for his own good, just like your grandfather. Aunt Martha smiled sadly. He came to me, you know, about a week before he disappeared. Showed me the evidence he'd gathered. Asked my advice. Elena leaned forward. What did you tell him? I told him to be careful, that Prescott was dangerous. Aunt Martha's eyes filled with tears. I should have done more, should have stopped him somehow. What happened the night? Michael went to confront Prescott? Aunt Martha was silent for a long moment. Your brother never made it to that meeting. What? Your father intercepted him. Tried one last time to talk him out of it. When Michael refused to back down, your father made a call. Elena felt cold despite the warm room. A call to who? To friends, people who could help. The kind of people your father never thought he'd associate with. Aunt Martha looked away. The accident was staged, Elena. The car going over the cliff, all of it. No. Elena shook her head in denial. Dad wouldn't. He couldn't have. He didn't intend for Michael to be harmed. Just removed from the situation. Given a new identity, sent somewhere Prescott couldn't find him. Aunt Martha's voice broke. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they could gather enough evidence against Prescott to bring him down legally. Elena stood abruptly, unable to sit still with the horror of what she was hearing. Are you saying my father faked Michael's death? His own son? He thought he was protecting him. Protecting all of you. If Prescott had discovered what Michael knew. So the empty coffin, the closed casket funeral, it was all a lie. Aunt Martha nodded slowly. Your parents were devastated, but they believed they had no choice. Elena paced the small living room trying to process this impossible revelation. If Michael didn't die, then where is he? Where has he been for 10 years? I don't know, Aunt Martha admitted. That's the truth, Elena. After the funeral, your father cut me out of the loop, said it was safer if fewer people knew the details. She reached for Elena's hand. But I do know this. Your father receives a phone call every year on Christmas Day. He takes it in his study alone. The call lasts exactly 5 minutes. You think it's Michael? I can't prove it, but one year I was at your parents' house when the call came. I stood outside the study door. Aunt Martha's eyes were distant with the memory. I couldn't hear much, but I heard your father say, "She misses you terribly." And then, we all do. Elena sank back onto the sofa, dizzy with the implications. Michael alive. Her parents' grief and act. 10 years of lies. Why tell me this now? She asked finally. After all this time? Because you've already started digging, and because Prescott is dead. Elena's head snapped up. Dead? When? Heart attack. 3 months ago, it was in all the papers. Aunt Martha leaned forward. If Michael stayed away because of Prescott, he might not know the threat is gone. But Dad would know. He could have told Michael. Brought him home. Unless there's more to the story, something even I don't know. Aunt Martha looked troubled. Your father was different after Michael died. Withdrawn. Started drinking too much. Your mother too, in her way. Pills for anxiety. Pills for sleep. She shook her head. Guilt changes people. Elena stood again, resolve hardening inside her. I need to confront them, make them tell me everything. Be careful, Aunt Martha warned. Your father has carried this secret for a decade. He won't give it up easily. I don't care. Michael is my brother. I have a right to know if he's alive. Aunt Martha rose shakily to her feet. From a drawer in a side table, she removed an envelope. Take this. It's an affidavit I had drawn up by my lawyer. Everything I've told you. Everything I know, written down and notarized. Why would you do that? Because I'm old, and my memory isn't what it was. Aunt Martha smiled grimly. And because if anything happens to me before this is resolved, I want there to be a record. A chill ran through Elena. You think I'm in danger? I think secrets are dangerous, especially ones that have been kept this long. She pressed the envelope into Elena's hands. There's one more thing you should know. The day after Michael disappeared, your father removed something from his safety deposit box at Riverdale Bank. He never told me what it was, but he was adamant that it be buried with Michael. In the empty coffin, Elena murmured, whatever it is, it must be important. Important. Enough to risk everything to hide it. Elena tucked the envelope into her bag alongside Michael's journal. Thank you, Aunt Martha. The old woman embraced her. Your brother loved you very much, Elena. Whatever happened, remember that. As Elena drove away from her aunt's cottage, her phone rang. Her father's number flashed on the screen. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Elena, I know you're upset. I know you have questions. Come to the house tonight. Your mother and I will explain everything. Please, just don't do anything rash. She deleted the message. Before confronting her parents again, she needed more evidence. The Riverdale Bank was a 40-minute drive. Elena spent the time making calls, tracking down former employees of her father's accounting firm who might have known about Prescott's dealings. No one wanted to talk. Some hung up as soon as she mentioned Vincent Prescott's name. Others claimed they couldn't remember details from 10 years ago. One former secretary said bluntly, I signed an NDA when I left, still binding, even with Prescott dead. At the bank, Elena hit another wall. Safety deposit box records are confidential, the manager explained politely, even for family members. Without a court order, Elena left frustrated but more determined than ever. If the bank wouldn't help, and her father's former employees wouldn't talk, then there was only one option left. She needed to see what was inside that coffin. At home, Elena researched the legal process for exhuming a body. It was complex, requiring court approval, but not impossible. With Aunt Martha's affidavit, Michael's journal, and the inconsistencies in the police report, she might have enough to convince a judge. As evening fell, Elena made one final call to a lawyer friend who specialized in unusual cases. I need your help, she told him. It's about my brother. I don't think he's dead. After explaining the situation, her friend was silent for a long moment. This is unprecedented, he said finally. If what you're saying is true, your parents could face serious charges. Fraud, filing false reports, misuse of county resources. I know, but Michael is my brother. If he's alive, I need to find him. Give me a day to research precedents. We'll need to approach this carefully. Elena thanked him and hung up. As she did, a text message appeared on her screen. From her mother. Please come home. We need to talk about Michael. Your father isn't well. Elena stared at the message, torn between anger at her parents' deception and worry for her father. Before she could decide, another text arrived. He's had a heart attack, Elena. We're at Memorial Hospital. Please come quickly. Her stomach dropped. Whatever secrets her father had kept, he was still her father. She grabbed her keys and headed for the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused. Something felt wrong. She called the hospital. Memorial Hospital, how may I direct your call? Can you connect me to patient information? I need to check if my father was admitted. Thomas Chambers. A brief hold then. I'm sorry, we have no patient by that name. Elena stared at her phone, at her mother's text. A trap? To get her to the hospital while they… What? Disposed of evidence? Made arrangements to silence Aunt Martha? Her phone rang again. Her father. This time, she answered. Dad. Elena. His voice sounded strained. Where are you? Where are you? She countered. Mom said you had a heart attack. A pause. I'm fine. At home. Your mother's right here. Then why did she text me that you were at Memorial Hospital? Another, Pause. Longer this time. Elena, your mother hasn't sent any texts today. Her phone is charging in the kitchen. A cold feeling spread through Elena. If her mother hadn't sent those texts, then who had? Dad, I need you to listen carefully. Someone just texted me from Mom's phone saying you'd had a heart attack. They're trying to lure me somewhere. Her father's voice sharpened. Where are you right now? At my apartment. Stay there. Lock them. Doors. I'm calling the police. Dad, what's going on? Who would? Prescott had partners, Elena. People who benefited from his operations. People who might not want the truth to come out, even with him gone. Then Michael is alive? You faked. His death, a heavy sigh. Yes, but it's complicated. More complicated than you know. The line suddenly went dead. Elena tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. Outside her apartment window, she saw headlights pull into the parking lot. A black SUV, with tinted windows. Not a vehicle she recognized. Her phone buzzed with another text, again from her mother's number. We're here. Come down. Elena backed away from the window, heart pounding. She grabbed her bag with Michael's journal and Aunt Martha's affidavit, then slipped out her apartment's back door, just as someone began knocking heavily on the front. Whatever truth lay in her brother's coffin, it was clear now that others wanted it to stay buried, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure it did. Elena ran through the back alley behind her apartment building, her breath coming in quick gasps. The night air felt cold, against her face. She could hear footsteps, someone following her. She ducked behind a dumpster, trying to slow her breathing. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Another text from her mother's number. We just want to talk. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Elena turned her phone off completely. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop. And they, somehow, had access to her mother's phone. She waited until the footsteps passed, then slipped out and headed in the opposite direction. She needed somewhere safe to go, somewhere these people wouldn't think to look for her. 20 minutes later, she knocked on a door she hadn't visited in years. It opened to reveal a surprised face. Elena? What on earth? Diane? Elena said breathlessly. I need your help. Diane Wu had been Michael's girlfriend before his supposed death. They'd dated for almost 2 years, and Elena had always liked her. After Michael's funeral, they'd kept in touch for a while, but eventually drifted apart as Diane moved on with her life. You look like you've seen a ghost, Diane said, ushering Elena inside. Are you okay? Elena glanced around the small, but cozy apartment. I'm not sure. I think I'm being followed. Followed? By who? It's a long story. It's about Michael. Diane's expression changed, a flash of old pain crossing her features. Michael? After all this time? She gestured toward the couch. Sit down. I'll make some tea. As Diane moved to the kitchen, Elena took in the photographs on the walls. Diane with friends with what appeared to be her parents, with a small boy who looked about 5 or 6. Is that your son? Elena asked when Diane returned with 2 steaming mugs. Diane nodded. That's Alex. He's with his father this weekend. I didn't know you had a child. There's a lot we don't know about each other anymore. Diane settled into an armchair across from Elena. Now, what's this about Michael, and why do you think someone's following you? Elena took a deep breath. I think Michael might be alive. Diane stared at her, teacup frozen halfway to her lips. What? Over the next half hour, Elena explained everything. The groundskeeper's comment about the light coffin, Michael's journal, Aunt Martha's revelations about Vincent Prescott, the strange texts and the people who had come to her apartment. Diane listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock to something unreadable. She set her tea down with a shaking hand. That's not possible. I identified his body, Elena. Elena blinked in surprise. What? When? After they found the car. The police called me. Your parents were too distraught, they said. Diane looked away. It was brief, just a glance. His face was damaged from the crash, but it was him. I'm sure it was him. But my aunt said, "Your aunt is elderly, maybe confused." Diane stood abruptly, moving to the window to close the blinds. "Michael is dead, Elena. I mourned him. I moved on. We all did." Elena felt a flicker of doubt. Had Aunt Martha been wrong? Had her father been lying on the phone? "I saw his body," Diane repeated firmly. "I'm sorry." Something in Diane's tone made Elena uneasy. The way she kept glancing at the clock on the wall, the slight tremor in her hands. "Diane, is everything okay? Fine, I'm just surprised to see you after all this time. And these accusations about your parents, they're not accusations." My father admitted it on the phone. He said Michael's death was faked. Diane's eyes widened slightly. "He actually said that? Those exact words?" Elena nodded. "Right before the call cut off. And now people are following you." Diane seemed to be thinking rapidly. "Have you gone to the police?" "Not yet. I don't know who to trust. That officer at the station warned me to leave things alone." Diane walked back to her armchair but didn't sit. "What are you planning to do?" "I filed for a court order to exhume Michael's coffin. It was a lie. Elena's lawyer friend was still researching the process, but something told her to be careful about what she revealed." "When?" Diane asked sharply. "The hearing is tomorrow morning." Diane nodded slowly. "I see." She picked up her phone from the coffee table. "Excuse me a moment. I need to check on Alex." She stepped into the hallway, speaking too quietly for Elena to hear. When she returned, her smile seemed forced. "You're welcome to stay here tonight if you're worried about going home. I can make up the couch." "Thanks," Elena said, watching Diane's face carefully. "That would be great." Later, as Diane was bringing sheets and a pillow for the couch, Elena casually asked, "Do you still think about him? Michael, I mean." Diane paused. "Sometimes. It was a long time ago. He mentioned you in his journal, said you were one of the best things in his life." Something flickered across Diane's face, pain, guilt, Elena couldn't tell. "He was a good man. Too good, maybe." "What do you mean?" "He couldn't leave things alone. Always had to do the right thing even when it was dangerous." Diane smoothed the sheet over the couch cushions with unnecessary force. "Sometimes the right thing gets people hurt." Elena's unease grew. "Did you know about his concerns with Vincent Prescott? The accounting irregularities?" Diane's hands stilled. "He mentioned some work issues. I didn't pay much attention." "He didn't tell you he was gathering evidence? Planning to confront Prescott?" "No." Diane's answer came too quickly. "He never said anything like that." Elena decided to take a risk. "That's strange. In his journal, he wrote that he told you everything. That you helped him make copies of the documents." Diane's face hardened. "You're lying. There's nothing like that in his journal." "How would you know what's in his journal?" A tense silence filled the room. Diane straightened, dropping all pretense of hospitality. "You should go," she said coldly. "You knew," Elena realized. "You knew Michael's death was faked." Diane moved toward the phone on the wall. "I'm calling security." "Were you part of it?" Elena pressed. "Did you help them convince everyone Michael was dead?" "You don't understand anything," Diane snapped. "Vincent Prescott wasn't just some white-collar criminal. He had people killed. He would have killed Michael if he hadn't disappeared. So it's true. Michael is alive." Diane seemed to struggle internally, then her shoulders sagged. "I haven't seen or spoken to Michael in 10 years. After he went into hiding, all contact was cut off, for everyone's safety. But you identified a body. Whose body was it?" "There was no body," Diane admitted. "Just a closed casket and a lot of people willing to say what needed to be said." She looked at Elena with something like pity. "Your parents did what they had to do to save their son's life. And what about me? I've spent 10 years grieving for someone who isn't dead. They were protecting you too. If you'd known the truth, you might have gone looking for him. Put yourself in danger. Put him in danger." Elena felt tears of anger and betrayal burning her eyes. I deserve to know if my brother is alive. Diane's expression softened slightly. Maybe you do, but I'm not the one who can tell you that. Then who can? Before Diane could answer, headlights swept across the window blinds, a car pulling up outside. Diane paled. You need to go, now. Why? Who is that? I made a call earlier. I thought I was doing the right thing. Diane looked genuinely distressed now. But I've been thinking about what you said, about deserving the truth. She grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her toward a back door. There's a fire escape. Go down to the street level, then head east. Don't look back. Diane, what's happening? Who did you call? People who worked with Prescott. People who still have a lot to lose if the truth comes out. She thrust a piece of paper into Elena's hand. This is an address. If you're serious about finding Michael, go there. Ask for Grace. A sharp knock sounded at the front door. Diane pushed Elena onto the fire escape. Go, and Elena, I'm sorry. The metal stairs creaked beneath Elena's feet as she hurried down. When she reached the bottom, she could hear voices from Diane's apartment above. Diane's and a man's, their tone argumentative. Elena didn't wait to hear more. She ran into the night, Diane's paper clutched in her hand. The address led her to a small law firm on the outskirts of town. At this late hour, the building was dark and locked. Elena found a 24-hour diner across the street and took a booth by the window, ordering coffee she didn't want just to have a reason to stay. She needed a plan. Her apartment wasn't safe. Her parents might be in danger too. And whoever was after her seemed to have connections everywhere. As dawn broke, Elena saw a light come on in the law office. An older woman with silver hair unlocked the front door and went inside. Taking a deep breath, Elena crossed the street and entered the building. A small reception area was empty, but she could hear movement from one of the back offices. Hello? She called. The silver-haired woman appeared in a doorway. Can I help you? I'm looking for Grace. The woman studied her for a long moment. Who sent you? Diane Wu. Something like recognition crossed the woman's face. You're Thomas Chambers' daughter, aren't you? Elena? Yes. How did you know that? You look like your mother. The woman sighed. I'm Grace Hoffman. I was your father's lawyer for many years. Were you involved in faking my brother's death? Grace motioned Elena into her office, closing the door behind them. I handled certain legal aspects. Your father needed someone he could trust, absolutely. Elena felt a surge of hope. Then you know where Michael is? No. For his safety and mine, that information was compartmentalized. Grace sat behind her desk, gesturing for Elena to take the chair opposite. But I do know he's alive, or at least he was the last time your father received confirmation. The Christmas Day calls, Elena murmured. Grace looked surprised. You know about those? My Aunt Martha mentioned them. She suspected they were from Michael. Martha always was too observant for her own good. Grace opened a drawer in her desk, removing a thick folder. I've been expecting someone to come asking questions since Vincent Prescott died. I just didn't think it would be you. What is that? Everything I have regarding your brother's case, the evidence he gathered against Prescott, the plans for his disappearance, the legal documents creating his new identity. Elena stared at the folder, hardly daring to believe it. Why would you show me this? Why now? Because Prescott is dead, and the statute of limitations has expired on most of the financial crimes. Grace pushed the folder across the desk. And because your father called me last night after speaking with you. He thinks you're in danger. From who? Prescott's associates? Some of them, yes, but mostly from the people who helped arrange your brother's disappearance. Grace's expression was grave. Not everyone involved had pure motives, Elena. Some saw an opportunity to profit from Prescott's criminal activities once he was out of the picture. The police officer who warned me to stop asking questions, Elena realized. Lieutenant Cooper. Grace nodded. Among others, They've been monitoring your family for years, making sure the truth stays buried. And now they're worried. I'll expose everything by having Michael's coffin exhumed. Exactly. Grace leaned forward. Your father wants to help you. He asked me to give you this. She handed Elena a sealed envelope. It's a formal petition for exhumation with his signature as next of kin, along with a sworn affidavit confirming the coffin does not contain human remains. Elena's hands trembled as she took the envelope. This is what I need for the court order. Yes, your father is ready to face the consequences of his actions. To tell the whole truth. Finally. Grace's expression softened. He loves you, Elena, and he loves your brother. Everything he did to protect his children. Where is he now, my father? Somewhere safe with your mother, until this is resolved. Elena opened the envelope, scanning the documents inside. With these, I can get the exhumation order today. 6 days later, after careful planning with Grace and Agent Chen, Elena drove down a quiet street in a small Oregon coastal town. Pine trees lined the road, and the distant sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop. The house was small but well kept, with a garden out front and wind chimes hanging from the porch. Elena sat in her rental car gathering her courage. What would she say to him after all this time? Would he even recognize her? Finally, she stepped out and walked to the door. Each step felt monumental, as if she were moving through a dream. She knocked. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened, and there he was, older with a beard he hadn't had before, his hair shorter and styled differently, but unmistakably Michael. Her brother. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Michael's eyes filled with tears. Elena, he whispered. You found me. You asked me to, she replied, her own vision blurring with tears. He pulled her into a fierce hug, and Elena felt a decade of grief lift from her shoulders. Her brother was alive, breathing, warm, real. When they finally broke apart, Michael led her inside. The house was simply furnished but comfortable. Photos on the walls showed him in his new life, hiking at a local festival with a dog by his side. No wife? No family? Elena asked, looking around. Michael shook his head. Too risky. I couldn't bring anyone into this deception. They sat at his kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between them. For hours they talked. Michael explained everything, how he'd worked with federal agents to document Prescott's crimes, how the plan to fake his death had come together quickly when Prescott's people had discovered his investigation. Dad helped, Michael said. He felt terrible about it, being caught in Prescott's web in the first place, then having to lie to you. But he thought it was the only way to keep everyone safe. Why didn't anyone tell me? Elena asked, the question that had burned in her for days. All these years thinking you were dead? Michael reached across the table, taking her hand. That was my fault. I insisted you not be told. You're a terrible liar, Elena. He smiled faintly. Always have been. I was afraid you'd give it away somehow, and then they'd come after you too. But Prescott is dead now. You could come home. Michael's expression grew serious. It's not that simple. Prescott had partners, people who took over his operations. The FBI is still building cases against them. My evidence is crucial to those cases, so you're still hiding, for now. He squeezed her hand. But not from you. Not anymore. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Elena thought about the coffin she had opened, expecting answers but finding only more questions. Yet the most important question had been answered. Her brother was alive. What happens now? She asked. Michael looked out the window at the setting sun. Now we find a way forward. Together. Elena nodded, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in 10 years. The truth had been buried in that coffin. Not her brother, but the evidence that had both separated them and ultimately brought them back together. Some truths were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, even if it took 10 years to unlock them. As darkness fell, brother and sister sat together, making plans for a future neither had believed possible just days before. There would be challenges ahead, dangers perhaps, but they would face them together. The coffin had finally given up its secrets. And Elena had found something she thought was lost forever. Her brother, and with him, a part of herself.